Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney. That's Nick Zararis, and Nick, JT Miller. I don't know if you've heard the news. Is a Los Angeles Laker. Wait, nope. He's a New York Ranger.
At least the Canucks made more than one phone call. Like, they didn't get a lot for JT Miller, and we'll talk about that throughout the course of the episode. But God, man, being in a bar, loud, music deafeningly loud, and the group chat's going crazy. And I'm like, what's going on? And pull my phone out, and I read it like 6 times. I'm like, yeah, that says Luka Doncic, doesn't it? And like, I hold it up to my friend, and he's looking at me like, what? There's no way. And the unanimous is, nah, Shams got hacked. There's no way. There's no way. And good Lord, man. It takes a lot to be the worst general manager in a city where Jerry Jones is also a general manager, but God bless the Dallas Mavericks. All right, this is a hockey podcast.
I was on the way home from the Knicks Lakers game.
Yeah.
I was talking to people. I was in the media room. I was talking to people, and then I left. Because you can't expect these things. No. Obviously, you can't predict them. So I left. I'm like, okay, like the train is being an ass again because it's New York City. So I have to leave because it's going to take me a while to get home. And I'm on the way home. And then I see the tweet. And I'm like, hold on a second. Everybody just hold on. I go to Shams' profile. I'm like, this is the real Shams. I'm following the real Shams. All of the fake ones I have blocked. So I don't want to get ball sack sports. Like, I'm not doing this. I have them blocked. I have everybody blocked except for the real insiders. I checked their profile. I'm like, okay, this is real. So I go back to the tweet. No. Let me check it again. No. Hold on. Wait. Huh? Wait a second. Like that is probably, that was the biggest trade, I think, in sports history. Honestly.
It's in the conversation. It's definitely in there. Speaking of big trades, we'll talk about the games, we'll talk about the trade, we'll talk about the big picture. But I think anyone who's just outright poo-pooing JT Miller is kind of missing the point. Mm-hmm. It's not that he is not a good player. He very much was the most effective forward on the ice in both games over the weekend. Most noticeable, most impactful.
He was the best player.
Yeah, most noticeable player on, frankly, almost either team, but sans Jack Eichel, who had a nice game against the Rangers on Sunday. But he's still got a motor. The question isn't so much this year as opposed to what happens, but being that there are still 30 games to go in the regular season and they are not mathematically out of it, you have to look at it, acquiring JT Miller, as they still think they're going to have a chance to make the playoffs, and this season is not over. Because if it were, I think you would see more experimentation. I think you would be seeing Brett Berard back up. I think you would probably see Brennan Othman at some point relatively soon if they were looking towards next year. So they're going to try and walk a delicate line of doing both. We know we're probably not going to make the playoffs next year, but we're going to use these final 30 some odd regular season games as kind of a ramp up to build momentum into next season, which has a track record of being a useful thing. You know, when the one problem with that, and the one reason that theory might not hold as much water, typically when you're doing that, it's because you brought in a new coach. Typically speaking, you've brought in a new coach with 20, 30 games to go, and you want to give him a head start for whatever the team's going to be like in the fall. Whereas we haven't gotten any indication one way or another which way the wind is blowing on Laviolette, like we were talking about before we started recording. It's not his fault the team just plays no defense, but he's also not helping his own case with some of these lineup decisions. You know, it's insane to me that the decision is to play Zibanejad on the wing as opposed to playing him at third line center, because
that would hurt his feelings, Nick. I don't know if you understand.
God bless Mika Zibanejad. God bless Johnny Brodzinski. He's a pro's pro. He's a good dude. That's not a serious third line center in today's NHL. Center. No, I mean the Rangers bottom 6. It took them till, I want to say, 12 minutes into the second period to register a shot on goal on Saturday against the Bruins. That bottom 6 was a total non-factor. And you look at the personnel, and yeah, that kind of makes sense that group was going to struggle to generate any offense. But as far as the games themselves, the Bruins are not that good, and that was a really disappointing performance from the Rangers on Saturday afternoon. The Bruins can't score like at all in any situation, and to give up that many goals, that's just not a good look. They bounce back decently. The comeback, and I said it on Twitter, it's probably a lost season, and these wins don't really matter a whole lot, but it's nice every now and then to just turn your brain off and say, at least they can win a hockey game.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to the JT Miller trade, I think the best take, well, I can say this because it's my take, but like the you can have your cake and eat it too with this, where JT Miller actively makes the Rangers better. He's still a really good player, and if you want to question his locker room, mental or whatever, I guess that it's a fair thing because of what happened in Vancouver. But I think Trocheck, for lack of a better term, is a really good babysitter for JT Miller. They've been best friends since since they were like 9 years old. I think that's the graphic that I saw. They've been friends for a long time. JT Miller apparently moved into Trocheck's house. Like, they are best friends, and like Trocheck is essentially going to make sure that JT Miller doesn't do anything out of the ordinary in the locker room. So, but besides that, JT Miller is a solid player that was, like we talked about a second ago, the best player for the Rangers easily this entire weekend. In the game score charts, he was top in both games, and he just looked like the best player on the ice. Forget about the analytics. He makes this team better. At the same time, trading a first round pick when you are not currently in a playoff spot is a decision. I will say that. And I understand that it is protected for this season. Top, I think it was 13 protected. And Vancouver then sent it to Pittsburgh for Marcus Pettersson. Now they have their whole team of Petterssons over there. But if that doesn't go this year, then Pittsburgh has the Rangers' unprotected first round pick next season, which is wild to me because you have no idea what your team is going to look like next season. Like, if this team is up in the air right now and there's a lot of decisions about who can we get out, what's going to happen, because right now the Rangers don't have a clear vision as to what they want their long-term team to look like.
Oh, I disagree. I think Chris Drury genuinely thinks he's going to have 3 32-year-old centers for the next 5 years, and the Rangers are going to be able to. And that's really,
yeah. I mean, maybe, but trading a first round pick that
the picks don't matter all that much. That's the thing I'm going to say here, because it's not Chris Drury's problem. Because if this goes badly, it won't be him who has to fix the mess. That's the way you have to think about this. And I know that blows people's minds sometimes, the idea that the GM isn't always going to act in the best interest of the team. I know there's always, well, why wouldn't he? He wants to keep his job. Well, those are not always the same thing. The team's interest and the GM's interest are not always in the same vein. When I was watching the game on Saturday before I went out with a couple of my friends, and I was just sitting there thinking about it, and the amount of assets they have burned over the last 3 years to just get one more top 6 forward, when they could have just gone at some point in the last 3 years and said, maybe it's us that's the problem. Maybe it's Mika Zibanejad or Chris Kreider that's the problem. We've auditioned 20 some odd guys to play alongside them in different permutations, and nothing has ever really gotten them going at 5-on-5. These are who they are as players. And I can vividly remember the stream we did the day free agency opened last summer of 2023, going into the President's Trophy year, and saying they brought in Blake Wheeler, Eric Gustafson, Jonathan Quick, and a bunch of AHL guys. They are definitively telling you they think Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, Trocheck, and Panarin are good enough. That all we need is one more top 6 winger, and we're right there. The problem is, in the year and a half since then, Kreider and Zibanejad have regressed. You could make an argument that Trocheck has regressed. I think it's fair to say Panarin had a career year last year. I won't say going down to 91, 92 points is big regression, but it's still regression. And the other problem, and the more fundamental issue, is because the Rangers were propped up by a handful of guys the last few seasons, the supporting cast kind of just got to come along for the ride. We would say, well, they're just going to wait around. They'll get their power plays. They'll win on the power play. Fox is more than enough. Miller is more than enough. And that's good enough for 50 some odd regular season games. The problem is, when you don't have to do as much, you start to get into bad habits. And even the good players on this team have developed those same bad habits, where Trocheck, Panarin, I don't want to hear another word about how good Trocheck is defensively ever again. I mean, this season has been the most illuminating.
He's been awful.
It's LA Fitness half court level defense out there most of the time from this forward group. Just absolute non-factors in the defensive zone. You know, Zibanejad made a nice play in the game yesterday, which ultimately led to the goal. I think it was the Miller goal, the Keandre Miller goal. Mm-hmm. But like, if you watch this team over the last few seasons, these issues have been there. The defensive effort of the forward group.
We've been saying it for the entire duration of this podcast. Like this is not a revelation to us.
The defensive effort of the forward group. We're not just talking about the defensemen. And look, we know the defensive group is not very good. We know it's Adam Fox and then Miller once every 2 games that you can reliably bank on. I know some people are a lot more excited about Will Borgen than us, but like, okay, I'll even give you Will Borgen. That's 3 out of 6 guys, and that's 1 pair that you feel reasonably good about most nights. That's not enough. And when your defense is as mediocre to bad as this group,
talking about 4 Nations defenseman Urho Vakanainen, you're not factoring him into the equation, Nick?
I mean, let's be fair. It's a nice accomplishment. It's cool you get to represent your country. The Rangers have no intention of Ukko Vakanainen being on this team next year. As far as the point I'm trying to make, the defensive effort fully throughout the team is a byproduct of how the last few years have gone, where they've been able to get away with subpar or outright bad defense because the 5-on-5 offense from the Panarin line was enough and the power play was enough. Now this year, the power play is mediocre to slightly above average as opposed to elite. You're losing about 1 goal every other game. The 5-on-5 offense took a massive step back. So you're not only not scoring enough, now all your guys are looking around like, well, we've been doing this for 3 years. What's the issue? Why can't we win games all of a sudden? Well, guys, you were supposed to be playing defense that entire time. It's just you were scoring enough where it wasn't an issue. Now, you know, it's great you added JT Miller. They're going to lose a lot of games 5-3 and 6-4. It's great JT Miller's here. He's not going to make Ryan Lindgren better at defense. No. He's not going to make Mika Zibanejad or Trocheck or Panarin. He's one guy. He's a good player. You know, before the season when I did my top 100 players, I think I had him in the low 20s. He's that good. He's genuinely a very good player. The problem is he's kind of a redundant skill set to what they already have. They need a defensive first forward who can actually do things defensively. They need defensemen who can do things defensively. You know, I think back to 2 years ago, spent the entirety of the month of January, February, and March saying, man, it would be nice if they had Chychrun instead of Lindgren. It would be nice if they had Chychrun instead of Lindgren. But instead, they rode out the Lindgren injury. They played 17 skaters multiple games to accommodate Patrick Kane, and they didn't learn any lessons. And that's what I think for people like you and me, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know generally where you're at, that's kind of the big issue here. It's they haven't learned from the last 3 seasons where these issues have been there. It's just they weren't as pressing because the power play was great and the Panarin line was more than enough. Now, what line do you genuinely feel good about 5-on-5? And the power play is very mediocre.
I'm going to push back on you a little bit when you're saying that JT Miller's a redundant player skill-wise, because I think in the past week, you know, a couple of games that he's been in the Rangers jersey, we've seen him be that kind of power forward that will go along the boards, not only fight for the puck, but win the puck and get the puck back out to the blue line for a shot or continue the cycle or actually crash the net and get a shot on goal, which a lot of players on this team keep refusing to do. Like the amount of still after years of passing and the pass is going nowhere. And every time they look around frustrated, the pass doesn't go through because of course it doesn't, because there's 7 skates and sticks in front of you. Yes, shoot the puck, brother. No, force the pass. Okay, that goes nowhere. And then they probably score a goal and going the other way. And now you look even more silly because you didn't shoot the goddamn puck. JT Miller actually wants to shoot the puck. So if nothing else, if all else equals 0, JT Miller is a forward on the Rangers that actively wants to put the puck on the net. And you know what? That's already a massive W for Drury, if nothing else. He finally got somebody that wants to score. So you know what? +2 to him. But yeah, like JT Miller is a really good forward. I think on both ends of the ice, he's a solid back checker, somebody that does give up on a play, and he won't just look around wondering like, oh, was I supposed to do that? Oh, was I supposed to skate back? Me? Like the meme of the guy holding the beer and he's like, me? Yeah. Like JT Miller knows his responsibilities. So I think he does actively make not only the offense better, but the defense better when he's on the ice. The problem is that he's on the ice for 60 minutes of the game. Like this is not basketball. You can't just put Josh Hart's a different example because Josh Hart will play 48 minutes, but like you can't put JT Miller on the ice the entire time and expect him to just play well the entire time. Like hockey doesn't work like that. You cannot put your best players on the ice the entire way and then just tell them to go do their thing. That's not how the sport works. So as great as JT is, and as great as JT Miller has looked in this past weekend and will probably continue to do so, Ryan Lindgren is still a massive issue. I tweeted this out, this weekend as well. It's like, I'm not saying Zach Jones is going to win you the Norris. I'm not saying Zach Jones is Bobby Orr. I'm not saying that he's the best defenseman of all time. But playing Ryan Lindgren over him is an awful decision that just continues to look bad. And it gets worse with every single passing game. Also, the Rangers got Eric Brandstrom. I understand that he's been through a lot of different systems over the past, couple of years, hasn't been able to stick to a team. You got him. Hey, you should try him out. You should see how he looks under Peter Laviolette. Maybe you should sit Lindgren for a game and have Brandstrom play. I understand that Laviolette after last night's game was like, oh, the pairs are set and it has to be Fox and it has to be Lindgren together. And like, it's like, first of all, dog, like that's not how coaching in the NHL works. And you should know that better than most people on the planet because you've been coaching for a long time in the NHL. You should know of all people that I understand that you practice in pairs and the pairs are set, quote unquote. But if the pairs aren't working, if one player is clearly dragging down the other player on the pair, maybe it's a good idea to change that. Just try it. Like the fear of trying, it continues to plague the Rangers both on the ice and off the ice, whether that be deployment or strategy. And that is one of the things that's holding this team back.
So this year, Ryan Lindgren and Mika Zibanejad have played 171 minutes together. In those 171 minutes, the Rangers have been outscored 14-7. In minutes with just Lindgren, it's 23-23. In minutes with just Zibanejad, it's 15-22 goals for and against. In minutes without either guy on the ice, the Rangers have outscored opponents 62-51. They are visibly ineffective. Yeah. The numbers bear out that they've been ineffective. And I think it's really informative and illuminative that instead of going Miller, Trocheck, Zibanejad down the middle, they've opted to put Zibanejad on the wing. And some of that is probably for saving face purposes, as we can't pay a third line center $8.5 million. We want to give him a chance. All of the cliches you would expect to hear. But at the same time, if that's the plan, that we're going to run 32-year-old Zibanejad on the wing with Trocheck or Miller, and then Panarin's going to play with one, and then we're going to figure out the rest, where to Kreider, Cooley, Riley Smith, etc. slide in. I think fundamentally, the defensive effort of the forward group, I don't want to say is disqualifying because, this isn't like a contest, but like, it's really hard to envision a world where they're going to be able to create enough offense with this group of forwards without conceding even more defensively and exposing even more, because that's really the trade-off here. Trading for JT Miller and saying, we're going to have as loaded a top six as we possibly can, and we're going to try and figure out the rest. It's building the whole plane out of one material. We're going to try and outscore our issues. And that's a nice idea, but unless you can get this power play going, 26, 27% for the rest of the way, you're just not going to score enough. Even if you do have an increased scoring rate, which I do expect, Miller had the 2 games. He has 8 shots on goal in 2 games. That'll play if he's going to rip 4 shots a game, but again, there's layers to this. The reason the defense looks as bad as it does is because they're not scoring enough. So the defense has a more pronounced attention on it. Because the defense is so bad, there's more pressure on the offense to score more. You know, that binary of rock in a hard place keeps ebbing and flowing back and forth game to game. And it's created this environment where you have no idea what you're going to get on a given night.
It's the problem starts fundamentally because this has been a problem. Like, this is not the first day of this problem arising. We've been doing this show for how long? 3 years
3-ish
now?
seasons. June 22.
Yeah, so nearly 4 years now. 4 calendar years. And we've been talking about this essentially every week on the show. That the defense is a problem and teams will exploit it. And it's only getting worse. It really is. And teams understand that the Rangers are not good defensively. Like, they have the same access to the game tape that we do. We watch it in real time. They watch it later. But it's still the same game tape. They have coaches and video, all these video guys in the room breaking down everything that the other team can use to exploit the Rangers defensively. And you see it game in and game out. You see these either long stretch plays that kind of draw out two players to one, and that creates some space for the 2-on-1. Or like Carolina did very well last week, where I had a front row seat to the Rangers getting shut out, and Vinny Trocheck passing on a breakaway. That was a great game to be at. Carolina did a really good job of creating a lot of chaos in the middle of the zone, and then getting a trailer to come in, skating into the blue line, getting that pass, and then just having the entire 30 feet of just open ice to skate into and rip a shot. And Shesterkin can't see a goddamn thing. But unless you listen to the people on Twitter that complain every time he gives up a goal, in which case, I guess that's his fault, his bad. But teams understand how to break down the Rangers. In fairness, it's gotten easier with time, so they don't have to spend as much time dissecting all the data. But this is not something that is new. This is a reoccurring issue that has plagued this team for a very long time. And it goes back to even the past core with Stahl and Girardi and Klein and all those guys. The Rangers continue to not understand how to evaluate defensemen, and it is a problem that is not going away.
And on top of that, I do want to revisit this subject because I do think it's worth discussing. The goal is to win the Stanley Cup here. I know that escapes some people, and I think the way the Rangers have handled certain things would dissuade you from that idea, where they've been very, I won't say non-committal, but they've been very weird in the times they've chosen to be aggressive in improving the roster. That team 2 years ago, in December, we were all kind of like, this team does not feel the same way last year's team did. And you can add whoever you want, but there's something fundamentally off here. And they lost in the first round to the Devils. There was just, the effort was inconsistent. The link-up play was awful, where you couldn't string together more than 3 passes in a row without turning the puck over. Last year's team was a little bit different. Throughout the fall and the early stages of winter, even through after the little rut at the end of January where Connor Mackey turned the season around in Ottawa, once you get past that, you still saw okay, this team really does have the goods. The East is wide open. It's us in Florida. And the opportunity to go get a Jake Gensel was out there, and they chose to get a middle 6 forward and a third line center. And when in a year where it would have made sense to kind of throw caution to the wind and be aggressive, they were very lukewarm at best in adding Roslovic and Wenberg. And this year, on a team that's kind of a long shot to make the playoffs now, you didn't give up a ton, because as much as I disagree with the idea that Filipino isn't that good, the injury volatility is a reasonable question. Sure. And something that I do think is worth considering in the evaluation of the trade. But you could have conceivably sold off all your expirings, got a bunch of extra picks, had a bunch of extra cap flexibility this summer, and really try to set up for that next wave of guys. I was talking about this with someone on Twitter over the weekend. Adam Fox is not going to be young forever. Adam Fox is going to be 27 years old by the end of next season. We're starting to get to that, well, he's not going to fall off, but the realistic expectations of a defenseman being what they are, he's not going to stay young forever. Shesterkin is not going to stay young forever. And you're never going to be able to convince the Rangers people that, hey, it would probably be beneficial if we missed the playoffs this year. We took a step back, because all they hear is you don't want $3 million in ticket revenue. And that's the end of the conversation, because if this team makes the playoffs, they will sell out the 2 minimum home games they get. They will be the road team in the first round, so they would at most get 3. But each one of those is $1 million+ of just ticket revenue. That doesn't include concessions and all the bells and whistles in a given game. So they're going to try and do this. And maybe there are more moves to come. I think there are more moves to come. But I don't think adding more to a team that's going to miss the playoffs makes sense.
No.
If you can get guys you think align with your long-term vision, like if, let's say, they trade Lindgren ahead of the deadline and they want to play Brandstrom or they want to play Zach Jones, fine, sure, that makes sense. But going out there and getting another veteran guy that you're going to need to extend after this year as, a stopgap, that just seems dumb. And that's kind of what I'm worried about here. It's, yes, they looked better yesterday than they did the day before. They have a little bit of juice. The new player thing, especially a good player, that does matter. That does give guys the little bit more confidence, stick their chests out, all that good stuff. But we're talking about long shot odds here. I tweeted out the graphic right before we went live. The most favorable projection is Money Puck, and that has the Rangers as a 49% chance to make the playoffs. The lowest is HockeyViz, which has them at 25%. They are going to need to play close to 630 points percentage hockey. They have 30 regular season games remaining. That means winning 23 out of the final 30 games. That is a real long shot for what this group has shown.
And we go back to the lack of wanting to try things, because, again, you acquire Eric Brandstrom. I kind of don't know what the plan for him is. You have Zach Jones, who, again, I'm not.
Can we get a picture of him holding up today's newspaper, by the way?
I'm not saying that he's going to be a Norris winning defenseman. What I am saying to you is that he's your draft pick. He's a young developing player. He's extremely frustrated that he's getting shut out of ice time by Urho Vakanainen, a guy who's not even going to be here next year. And why, if I'm Peter Laviolette, obviously I would send Ryan Lindgren home, but at least for a game, why can't we do something where Vakanainen sits and Lindgren sits? And then you have a pairing of Brandstrom Jones or Schneider and Branch, have any configuration you want. Have Miller be with Fox, and then just see how the other two pairs shape up in game. And if it doesn't work, okay, it doesn't work. And maybe you try it in practice and you try some other configurations. And, if you want to insert Lindgren back in the lineup after a game, whatever, so be it. The complete lack of even desire to change Laviolette after the game, last night was, these pairs are set and Fox and Lindgren are together because they're a set pair. Dog, you watch the games just like we do. At a certain point, I understand that some of it is probably them propping up Lindgren to trade him at the deadline. But the problem with that is that if you want to prop a player up to trade him, to up his trade value, he has to play well. He has to play not as poorly as Ryan Lindgren has played this whole season. And your response to him playing miserably badly is to give him more ice time because he's a set partner with Adam Fox. That doesn't make any sense. Not only has he been bad, he's been dragging Adam Fox down to the ground as a result. Adam Fox hasn't been terrific this season. That's not breaking any news here. Adam Fox, we've seen his ceiling, or we've seen how high he can go. And this season, we haven't really seen a whole lot of that every single game. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of times he can't do that because he's got this anchor next to him, which is a big problem. And the fact that Laviolette continues to not want to change that is another red flag in what has been a season of red flags.
It's befuddling. And this is where we get into like the Palace intrigue of trying to understand what's going on. Because from a conversation perspective, I think it's infinitely more interesting to try and determine what they think they're doing as opposed to dissecting the results of a given game. Because all of these games are more or less the same. They all have the same feel of no lead is safe, Igor and Quick trying their best, one really flashy, explosive play from Fox or Miller. And then, do we score on the power play tonight or no? And that generally determines how these games go, if they can steal a power play goal to kind of mitigate their lack of 5-on-5 offense. The big apprehension in acquiring Miller, and the reason I don't think, for big picture purposes, that this makes a whole lot of sense in terms of trying to win a Stanley Cup is this team is old. This team is expensive. And I know there are going to be sarcastic people, and every time I say the Rangers are old, there's a smartass who replies, they're the 8th youngest team in the NHL. Look who the young players on this team are. Lafreniere, Braden Schneider, Edstrom, Will Cooley. And I guess I was going to say you
can't forget about him.
When one of those guys is capable of playing first line or first pair minutes, then we can have a conversation about the Rangers being a young team. Their 5 most expensive and their highest point producing forwards are all over the age of 30. And after this season, by the start of next year, they will all be at least 32 years old. They are going to have upwards of $40 million tied up in said players, Panarin, Trocheck, Kreider, Miller. And don't forget Lafreniere, 7, Fox is 9.5, and Shesterkin's 12.5. Really quickly. And people will say, well, the cap increases will pay for it. Expecting the cap increases to pay for everything has been a Rangers thing since the salary cap was $42 million 10 years ago. Don't tell me, oh, it's fine, the cap will pay for everything, because that's when you have to give away Cam Talbot for a 2nd-round pick. That's when you have to give Carl Hagelin away for a 3rd-round pick. And the problem for the Rangers is their depth isn't at that level where after 2015, you could look at it and say, well, they kind of tapped out what they could from this group. They kind of needed to reassess. And the bulk of that team was still relatively young. A lot of those guys were still about to sign their first expensive contract. You think about Stepan, McDonough, etc. And you keep going down that list. Well, how did that team stay competitive? Well, they got Kevin Hayes and Jimmy Vesey for free. Those guys wanted to come here. That helped. Buchnevich, they had drafted several years earlier and marinated over in Russia for a while. The Rangers don't have a great next wave of guys. Even if you genuinely believe Gabriel Perreault is going to be a first-line player in the NHL, which we'll see, that's one guy. That is one singular guy who doesn't play center and probably doesn't play wing in the same two-way vein that you probably need to be the best player on the line. You can get away with your best player on a line being a winger if it's Mark Stone and you can play him next to Brett Howden. You can get away with that if you have Mark Stone. If you're telling me Gabriel Perreault is going to be Mark Stone, sure, sign me up right now. But that's at least, 2 or 3 years away. The one thing the Rangers don't...
And Mark Stone also didn't become Mark Stone immediately.
Yeah.
It took him a while to become what he is now. So you're talking let's just say 4 or 5 years. And okay, well...
Adam Fox will be 31, Shesterkin will be 32, and we'll need to replace the goalie, our best defenseman.
Zibanejad will still be here.
Yeah, it's Zibanejad, Trocheck, and Miller will still be here. You know how we get out of this? We get Mika Zibanejad to run for mayor of New York as opposed to playing hockey. I think that's our get around here is we pivot him to politics because...
I unironically, I genuinely think the best thing for Zibanejad to do is go home for 2 weeks.
They all need resets. It's unfortunate he's going to have to go to 4 Nations because he genuinely could use the 2 weeks off. I think that's going to be a very funny gift that people are going to get. There are going to be a lot of kids in the tri-state area who have birthdays over the next few weeks, and they're going to get Mika Zibanejad Sweden jerseys because all the Adam Fox Team USA jerseys just won't be in stock at any of the retail stores anymore.
Look at the Kreider jerseys.
They're not making those. You have to get
they're not making those.
The only ones you can get officially from the NHL store are Fox, McAvoy, Austin Matthews, and Jack Eichel. If you want someone who's not one of those, you have to pay to get it customized, and it's $500 to get it customized.
That is such a strange decision.
Well, they picked the 3 captains and Adam Fox, the most marketable player on the Rangers. That's
such a strange decision.
I mean, it's even worse. Sweden, you can only get Nylander and Zibanejad. You can't even get Victor Hedman or Erik Karlsson or one of the goalies. Canada, you can only get McDavid, Sid, and McKinnon. Like they did a really and
I can't I did not know this. Yeah. Maybe I'm just not paying attention to foreign nations at all. I didn't know this. Guys, what are we doing here? What is this decision? Come on.
You would think at least the teams at their given retail locations, like if you walked into MSG, you would be able to buy a Trocheck or a Kreider. But no, Fanatics, as per usual, doesn't have the requisite stock to get this out. It's still pretty hard to get a Fanatics jersey that's not at a retail place. The Fanatics website doesn't have a ton in stock. Most of the jersey manufacturers like Cool Hockey, who does them, does a really good job. That's where most of mine are from. They don't have Fanatics jerseys in stock, so they're doing a great job there. But as far as the big picture,
it's okay because Fanatics makes how many billions a year?
Everyone loves a monopoly. Everyone loves a monopoly. Yeah. But as far as the Rangers, Zibanejad, etc., the big conversation here is, and this I think, if you take nothing else away from this episode, the Rangers weren't good enough to win a Stanley Cup last year and the best year in the rest regular season they've ever had. They got significantly worse. They slapped JT Miller as duct tape over the hole. Yeah, some of the water is going to stop leaking out because there's tape over the hole. Water's still going to be seeping out, though. And as long as this team is as leaky as it is defensively, and frankly, as it is narratively, shout out Jimmy Vesey.
Love Vesey.
Swinging from the hip. I respect it. And look.
And honestly, I see where he's coming from because again, what is he, 30, 31?
He's in his 30s.
Something like that. And when you're 31 and you're essentially clinging on to being on an NHL team and you don't get playing time, I can't fault him for being upset that, what is this playing. His job is on the line and he's not getting ice time. So he can't even prove to other teams that he's worth another contract. Because he's sitting in the press box with Zach Jones, and they're both yelling about how they should be playing. I get it. Listen, I understand. I get his play.
And it's crazy to me because you would think Jimmy Vesey, who Chris Drury gave a lifeline to, lest we forget, Jimmy Vesey got a PTO 3 years ago to make this team. And the first 3 months went really well. And they gave him a 3-year contract off those first 3 months. And this is a guy who 3 years later is very much like, guys, what the hell? I thought I was on this team. And I do think there is an argument to be made. And I think this has been a Rangers issue as an organization forever. These guys don't get communicated with very well. You dating back to the regime before this and the one before that, these guys, even the veterans now, don't get communicated fairly what their expectations are. We still have that story floating around out there that the Rangers gave Kravtsov that bullshit, like your heart rate test wasn't in the target zone, so we have to send you to the AHL. Whereas they could have just been upfront with him and said, we don't think you're ready, blah, blah, blah. But they were worried about him going back to Russia, so they bullshitted him. And you got to tell these guys, man. I know I remember it being a critique of Vigneault while he was still the coach that guys would know if they were playing or not until they walked in the locker room and they saw the lineup written on the dry erase board. I don't know if that's still the case, but you can tell very clearly that Jimmy Vesey, Zach Jones, Kakko before that, these guys were not being communicated with. And I don't think that communicating with them will buttress all of their frustration, but at least make them feel like it's open-ended, that there are expectations, that there's a path to playing again. I think that's the biggest thing for these support, 13th forward, 7th D guys is, don't just tell them, hey, be ready, we need you. Tell them, we want you to get back in here, but we need to see X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, you're wasting these guys' time. Jimmy Vesey probably gets moved at the deadline for like a 5th or a 6th round pick to a contending team, and it'll be good for him to play. But at the same time, these are hockey players. They want to play. They want to play.
And I think another aspect of this is the clear favoritism.
Yes.
From the coaching staff and from Drury too, but day to day it's from the coaching staff, where Zibanejad will make egregious decisions game in and game out, continue to play first line minutes. VZ doesn't make a mistake and just kind of is out there and doesn't impact the game positively in many ways, but also doesn't actively give the other team a goal, and he sits for 10 games. And that, I understand the rules are different. I'm not out here comparing VZ to Zibanejad. I understand Zibby's got a long-term no-move clause, and he's, supposedly still a top 6 player, and then yada, yada, yada. And VZ's not any of the 6. I get it. Well, I'm saying from a favoritism perspective, you cannot play favorites. You can't. And if somebody continues to play poorly, you cannot continue to reward them with top 6 minutes and power play time or top 2 defensive minutes and all penalty kill time. You can't objectively as a head coach. And I'm not here to tell Laviolette how to coach. He's been a head coach in the NHL for 30 a long
years.
time, a very long time. So I have never coached a team in the NHL before. So clearly, what do I know? But the favoritism is so obvious and blatant that I can see it from here, and I'm sitting at home. And if I can see it, what does that tell you about everybody in the locker room? It's shining, it's a blinding light where no matter how many mistakes X, Y, and Z player make, they will continue to play in their roles no matter what, while other players don't make nearly as bad of mistakes, and they're gone, sent to the abyss until further notice.
And it's frustrating because, what has Ryan Lindgren done in his career to be infallible that no matter what, he cannot come out of the lineup if he's healthy enough to play? Hell, even when he's not healthy enough to play, they drag his corpse out there sometimes. It's really frustrating for us to watch. I can't imagine what it's like to be a guy on that team who feels like they're busting their ass, and you look around and you see guys giving less than that. It's got to be pretty frustrating. And I'll leave you with this. This is the last thing I wanted to touch on. I don't think Chris Drury acquired JT Miller to effectively be a snitch, an in-between of what's going on in the locker room. I do think Chris Drury looks at JT Miller and says, this guy's like me. This guy looks at the game the same way I do, plays with a lot of emotion, and will drag these guys into the fight and try at his best to make the team more competitive and more in between the whistle stuff. At the same time, all of the guys that I know Chris Drury would like to fire out of a catapult right now for tanking this season are not going to start changing how they act now. Go back and watch the episode we recorded the day of NHL free agency 2 years ago. The first thing Andrew and I say is, it's great that they added Blake Wheeler and all these guys on, minimum deals, they're low risk, whatever. This team ultimately comes down to Zibanejad, Kreider, Panarin, and Trocheck. Now you can put JT Miller in there as well. None of those guys is going to magically change how they play hockey at 32, 33 years old. Those guys have been in the NHL, all of them now, more than 10 years. At that point, you are what you are. You're not going to materially change who you are, because that's really hard to do. The greats can do that. People like Sid, people like Erik Karlsson, they can adapt their games as they get older. Really good, but not all-time great players, they can't adapt. They will keep going with what got them there as long as they can until the wheels come off. And you very well might be seeing the wheels come off on Zibanejad, on Kreider, on Trocheck, and to some extent on Panarin.
I had a front row seat to Carolina versus the Rangers. I wasn't expecting to go to the game, and my dad texted me. I think it was at 5 p.m. He's like, "Hey, get dressed because we're going." And I had somebody in front of me say, and I tweeted this out. That's why I'm on my phone trying to remember what they said. And the guy in front of me said, "That's my guy Lindgren. reliable defense. And I think like that is the crux of a lot of not just the thought process from the fans, but from the organization as well. Everybody's watching the same game, unless maybe there's two alternate universes going on, and one of them has Lindgren playing well, and the other one that we're in is the one where Lindgren doesn't. I don't know, but forget analytics, forget everything associated with deeper understanding of the game. And if you hate analytics, just eye test it, dude. He fails the eye test miserably. Every game he fails it. And the fact that there are people like that fan, and I would have to imagine like Laviolette, because he keeps putting him on top pair minutes with Adam Fox, and like Chris Drury, you continue to not trade him and just have Lindgren be out there. There's a fundamental difference and a fundamental rift of how people see defensemen and how people rate defensemen. Like for people like us, Nick, we watch Ryan Lindgren play. He is a step slow, and
he wasn't fast to begin with.
No, doesn't read the game well, can't defend situations all that well, has to rely on the goalie bailing him out a lot of the times. Like, this season has been an utmost atrocity for a player of Ryan Lindgren's caliber, and somebody that has fallen off a cliff. Like, he was never this bad. Like, he had his moments, but like this year he's been truly awful. And the fact that there are people within the organization and also clearly around the fan base that still thinks of Ryan Lindgren as a good, reliable defenseman, I genuinely feel like we're watching two different players. Like, that's how it feels. And it all goes back to the idea that the Rangers don't know what a good defenseman is. They lucked into Adam Fox. That's it. That's the end of the sentence. Like, that's the end of really good defenseman on the Rangers. K'Andre Miller could be that, and he is that sometimes. I think he's been a little bit better now that Trouba's gone, and he's kind of stabilized a little bit. But like, I'm still like, the jury is still kind of out on what K'Andre Miller could be and what
he's athletic Mike Matheson for now.
I guess
that's what K'Andre Miller is for now.
If you want to say that, and he had a nice goal against Vegas, so that nice shot. But like, defensively, sometimes he's good, sometimes he's like, yo, like, where are you? Like, dog, I don't know why you're in Utah. The game is in Vegas, dog. Like, I don't know where you are. But like, that's the end of the sentence, and it all goes back to, it all boils down to, hey, jury, like, can you explain to me what you think a reliable, solid defenseman is and what their job is? What are they expected to do? And if the first thing that comes out of, whether that be jury or a fan or whoever, if the first thing that comes out of somebody's mouth when they ask that question is they have to be physical, then you failed the test. Because the number one job of a defenseman is to defend, not to be physical. It's great that you're physical, but if that leads to the other team getting 2-on-1s because you're pinching to get a hit, like some defensemen have recently done on the Rangers that are no longer on the team, then you're not doing your job. Fundamentally, if the first thing that you don't say is something about their playing defense well, you've lost the plot. That's kind of where we are.
The last thing I'll say on that, you don't want all defense, you don't want all physicality, you don't want all defense, you don't want all offense. Ideally, you want somebody who's good at least one of offense or defense if they're going to play defense. You look at what the Stars are doing on the right side of their defense. That's very befuddling when you look at the guys they've acquired.
We got a comment which I really agree with. They said, is this better on YouTube, is saying Lindgren has been labeled a warrior, a nondescript superhero nickname that has carried him through his career. Basically, he comes back quick from injuries. Yeah. A warrior, like,
it's admirable.
Yeah.
It's admirable. That doesn't win hockey games.
I'd rather you be a warrior than not be a warrior, sure. But like, can you skate back on defense, please? That's kind of what I care about more day to day.
Sometimes I'm very confused by the same people who swear all they care about is winning, they'll do anything to win, are also the ones who get caught up in the nonsense. Like, I jokingly tweeted the Chris Paul hits 3 to cut lead to 40 for trading for JT Miller, and someone quote tweeted it. Someone replied and was like, he was the best player on the ice. He plays with an attitude. They lost the game 6-2. You don't get to do that. They're so tough. They're so when you lose the game, it doesn't matter how tough you are. You know, the point of sports is to win. You know, you play to win the game. You don't play to have the right attitude. You don't play to be tough. You don't play to beat people up. You play to win the game. If you get caught up in they're playing with so much energy and intensity and they're not getting pushed around.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. Did you win?
Yeah.
No, then it doesn't matter.
Right. Is the not getting pushed around in the room with us right now, brother? Look at the scoreboard. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Did you score more goals than the other team? That should be number one on your agenda. Now, playing, being difficult to play against, not being pushed around, is that important? Yeah, but it shouldn't be top one on the list.
Yeah.
Number one, did you score more goals than the other team?
That's the goal.
And if that's not your number one, then what are we doing here?
Yep.
Because that's the point
the
of sports. The goal is to win the game. If that's not your goal, then what are we here for?
All right, that'll do it for this week's edition of Liberty Blue. Barring another transaction of note, we'll talk to you guys next week. If you could be so kind, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple or Spotify. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell so you get a notification whenever streams or content goes live. We will talk to you guys next week.
Later.